Welcome to Spaceverse, your portal to cosmic adventures. Ship 30 has completed testing for Flight 5. What's next on the agenda? Starship's next-generation test tank has been tested. How did it perform? The first tank section for Starship's next-generation ship has been spotted. What makes it different? Falcon 9 returns to flight just 16 days later, and there's a new sign of life on Mars? Let's begin today's news with a visit to the launch site at Starbase, Texas. This is the most advanced launch site on Earth and the home of the Starship rocket. SpaceX is currently preparing the launch site for their 5th orbital flight test campaign, which includes repairing the orbital launch mount, the main structure that supports Starship during launch. Let's take a quick look at the progress there before moving on to other projects at the site. As usual, the orbital launch mount has undergone numerous repairs and upgrades, many of which aren't visible to the untrained eye. However, comparing the mount to its condition a few months ago reveals noticeable improvements. Typically, extensive repairs are needed after each launch, but this time the repairs seem minimal. Currently, scaffolding surrounds the upper part of the launch mount and will be removed a few days before a launch to allow workers to complete any last-minute repairs or upgrades. Another essential step before a launch is applying a fresh coat of paint to the legs of the launch mount. This could happen anytime before the launch, likely sooner rather than later, since Booster 12 has already undergone a static fire and the launch mount won't experience any more flames until liftoff. Once these steps are finished, the only tasks remaining are stacking and launching. But what's the status of the Chopsticks? If you're not familiar, the Chopsticks are the tower arms that close around the rocket to lift it. They are crucial for stacking the rocket and also for recovering it, as these metal beams can catch the booster out of the air, eliminating the need for landing legs. If you've been following us for a while, you'll know that Flight 5 aims to catch and recover the super heavy booster for the first time ever. This means the Chopsticks must function flawlessly, or we could witness a giant rocket crashing into the pad. We've seen almost every part of the Chopsticks' moving components replaced, including some tiny pistons recently. Although not hugely significant, it shows SpaceX's commitment to successfully catching Booster 12. Work continues, but there isn't much left to do. Now let's move away from Tower A and Flight 5 to take a closer look at the future of Starbase. Before we reach SpaceX's next-gen launch and catch tower known as Tower B, let's stop by Starhopper. This was the first Starship test article to fly under the power of a single Raptor engine, marking the first flight of a full-flow stage combustion engine. That's a big deal. It now serves as a water tank with picnic tables beneath it, a nice retirement. But we're not just here for hobby. We're also here to check out a new fence that SpaceX is installing. As you can see, it appears to be a modular fence design, which seems temporary. SpaceX likely learned their lesson after having to demolish the Gateway to Mars sign just 6 months after it was built to make room for Tower B. This new approach is much safer since the fence can be removed if needed for other uses, such as a tank farm expansion. This new fence is identical to the one blocking off the north entrance to the launch site, ensuring no more 6-month demolition projects. Now that I've mentioned Tower B, let's check out the progress there as promised. When we last looked, the tower was 4 sections high, and as you can see in these pictures, it still is. However, this could change soon, as the 5th section is about to be added. At the time of recording, the massive CC-8800-1 crane was still connected to Section 4 at the top of the tower after its lift. This is because SpaceX needs to weld and bolt the tower sections together before moving on, ensuring it's secure enough to lift the world's heaviest rocket. In the next few days, the crane will likely be hooked up to the next section for stacking. In fact, Section 5 is already at the launch site next to Tower B, and by the time you're watching this video, it may already be stacked. Now let's move to the build site where there have been significant developments, starting with Ship 31, the final Block 1 Starship slated for Flight 6. In the last episode, we saw this ship receive all 6 of its Raptor engines in Mega Bay 2, where SpaceX quickly installed them. So what's next for this ship? Typically, after engine installation, the next step is testing. However, Ship 31 is a bit different due to its age. Instead of rolling Ship 31 to Massey's test range to check its new engines, SpaceX moved it to the high bay, specifically to the spot where Ship 30 used to be on the right side, where heat shield work is done. You might also recall that Ship 30, the sister ship to Ship 31, recently received a major heat shield upgrade. This involved adding a stronger heat tile and a backup ablative layer underneath. Ship 31, however, doesn't yet have these enhancements. Now that Ship 31 is at the high bay, we can expect similar upgrades to be applied. Crews will likely add scaffolding around the ship, remove its old heat shield, and replace it with a new one. With SpaceX experience, this process should hopefully be quicker than it was for Ship 30, and since Flight 5 is still a couple of weeks away, it probably won't cause any delays. Ship 31's arrival at the high bay was significant news, but even bigger news came that same night at its former location, Mega Bay 2. Ship 33, the first Block 2 Starship, was rolled into Mega Bay 2 for what seemed to be final preparations of its payload bay. Over the past weeks, we've seen SpaceX working on the payload bay for this new ship, and now we've spotted the first component of its fuel tanks. This Starship is set to bring major changes. On the night of the 26th, SpaceX moved the forward dome of the methane tank from the Star Factory to Mega Bay 2. It was then lifted onto the welding table, where sections are joined together, indicating that the nose cone will likely be rolled over and stacked soon. Now that we've had a close look at this new Block 2 section, how does it compare to the older Block 1 sections? When comparing the new section for Ship 33 with the same section used on Ship 31, several noticeable differences stand out. The most obvious is the shape of the dome. SpaceX has introduced a new dome design called the E-dome, which is more rounded and uses fewer parts and welds. This should enhance its strength and reliability while reducing weight and complexity. While we've known about this design change for a while, seeing it implemented in actual flight hardware is exciting. Additionally, the dome's location has slightly shifted, likely to accommodate the new shape. These changes were anticipated, but there's one surprising modification: the heat shield. We can now see what seems to be smaller versions of the heat shield tiles. This is unexpected because larger tiles were previously thought to be more beneficial for ease of installation and maintenance. However, it seems that in certain situations, smaller tiles might be preferable. This doesn't appear to be just a test, as Ship 33 has an entire row of these newer, smaller tiles. Their placement along a reinforced area suggests they may be addressing high stress points or potentially testing a new approach. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's see if we can uncover the reasoning behind this change together. There have been more developments at the build site, including the return of Ship 30 and the Block 2 test tank. But weren't those at Massey's for testing? Yes, they were, so let's review how that went. Starting with Ship 30, which is set to fly on Flight 5. Felix mentioned this in a past video, but let's clarify. Ship 30, currently at Massey's, had one of its engines replaced. It was static-fired before Flight 4, but due to the recent engine swap, it was safer to test its engines again. This is why it was moved to Massey's, since all engine testing has been conducted there since the last static fire of Ship 30. So, did Ship 30 static fire again? Yes, it did, and the test went flawlessly. It lasted about 6 seconds, and SpaceX footage showed all 6 engines successfully igniting. SpaceX also confirmed this on X. Typically, static fires can cause some tiles to fall off due to extreme vibrations, but this time the heat shield remained intact, indicating SpaceX improvements in this area. The missing tiles at the bottom of Ship 30 were already gone before this test, so they don't count. After the successful test, SpaceX quickly rolled Ship 30 back to Mega Bay 2 at the build site for further work, wasting no time. Ship 30 wasn't the only visitor at Massey's. The Block 2 test tank was also there for testing. It was lifted into the Can Crusher 2.0 for what seemed to be cryogenic proof testing, where the vehicle is filled with extremely cold liquid nitrogen to ensure it can handle the cryogenic propellants needed for launch. However, instead of being crushed, as might have been expected, it was simply lifted out after this test. This suggests that either the cryo test was the only planned procedure for now, or an anomaly occurred during testing. After being lifted out, the test tank was rolled back to the build site, which indicates we may not have seen the last of it. It was returned to the production site rather than to the Sanchez storage site. As for Flight 5, preparations are in full swing, with a launch expected in the second half of August. The next-gen Block 2 Starship is also progressing well. However, Starship isn't SpaceX's only rocket. After the second stage of a Falcon 9 rocket failed on the 11th, SpaceX was unable to fly any rockets. But here's the good news: Falcon 9 is now cleared to fly again. According to recent statements from SpaceX and the FAA, the rocket has been given the green light to return to flight. SpaceX identified that the recent Falcon 9 failure was due to a small liquid oxygen leak caused by a crack in a pressure sensor. This sensor, designed to measure pressure and ensure safe engine operation, ended up being the source of the problem. The leak led to freezing of components involved in delivering ignition fluid to the engine. Falcon 9's Merlin engines use TTEB, an ignition fluid that combusts spontaneously when mixed with oxygen, eliminating the need for a spark. However, when SpaceX attempted to restart the second-stage engine, the leaked TTEB led to a situation where the engine ignited too vigorously, resulting in what's known as a rapid unscheduled disassembly. In simple terms, it exploded. With the cause of the failure pinpointed, SpaceX was able to make the necessary adjustments to ensure Falcon 9's safety. The turnaround was impressively quick, just 16 days. One key change involved removing the problematic sensor, as SpaceX discovered that other sensors could provide the same data without the associated risk. Additional modifications were made to other sensors that could pose similar issues. After conducting test fires and investigations, the FAA granted SpaceX permission to resume launches. The Falcon 9's next launch on the 27th went off without a hitch, demonstrating that the changes were effective. The swift recovery of SpaceX Falcon 9, with just 16 days between the failure and its return to flight, is truly remarkable. To put this into perspective, there was only one other rocket launch globally between the failed Falcon 9 launch and its successful return. Now that Falcon 9 is back, expect SpaceX to ramp up its launch schedule, including catching up on delayed missions like Polaris Dawn, which will feature the first commercial spacewalk. Falcon 9 remains the only operational reusable orbital-class rocket worldwide, though it may soon have competition. Blue Origin, led by Jeff Bezos, is making significant strides with its upcoming New Glenn rocket. While Blue Origin's current rocket, New Shepard, is successful in landing from suborbital flights, it cannot reach orbit. New Glenn, their next-generation rocket, aims to change that. It's designed to be reusable and comparable in size to Falcon Heavy, rather than just matching Falcon 9's capabilities. Blue Origin is progressing towards New Glenn's first flight, slated for late September. They've been preparing with various tests, including landing leg tests and potential static fire tests of the upper stage. The interstage of New Glenn, which connects the first and second stages and includes canard fins for steering, has also been spotted, showcasing its unique design features. Blue Origin isn't the only contender keeping pace with SpaceX. Rocket Lab is also in the race, focusing on their new, larger Neutron rocket, which is designed for propulsive landing, much like Falcon 9. This is in contrast to their smaller Electron rocket, which they've been trying to land with parachutes. Recent updates from Rocket Lab include images of Neutron's development, featuring tank components and a tank dome. Although Neutron's launch was initially set for 2024, recent progress suggests that a launch could be imminent. We're nearing a time when reusable rockets could become as prevalent as their non-reusable counterparts. Shifting to Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover is making significant strides. Currently exploring the Jezero crater, Perseverance is investigating an ancient riverbed that once had water. Although water no longer flows there, evidence indicates that it did millions of years ago. This makes the location ideal for Perseverance to search for signs of ancient microbial life, given the potentially habitable conditions created by the ancient water. Recently, Perseverance came across a rock that epitomizes its mission. While climbing the Neretva Vallis riverbed as it exits Jezero crater, Perseverance discovered a rock nicknamed Chaiava Falls, named after the tallest waterfall in the Grand Canyon. This rock is intriguing due to its distinctive white spots outlined in black, and it shows evidence of past water flow through large veins of calcium sulfate. These characteristics make Chaiava Falls an ideal candidate for studying potential signs of life, particularly microbes and algae. However, the presence of water alone doesn't guarantee life, as other rocks on Mars also show signs of ancient water flow. What sets Chaiava Falls apart are the unusual white and black spots observed in a reddish area on the rock, situated between the calcium sulfate veins. Perseverance has employed various instruments to analyze and collect samples from Chaiava Falls, including a rock sample intended for future return to Earth. One hypothesis about the white and black spots is that they result from a chemical reaction that might have been influenced by ancient microbial life, potentially indicating a past environment conducive to life. It's definitely exciting. While the discovery of Chiava Falls is intriguing, it's important to consider all possibilities. Some theories suggest that tiny crystals found on the rock might contain olivine, which forms from volcanic activity. This has led to the idea that both the olivine and sulfate could have been created under extreme heat, potentially without biological involvement. However, there's reason to stay hopeful. Perseverance has detected organic carbon-based compounds in the rock. While these compounds aren't evidence of life themselves, they are crucial for it. Finding these compounds alongside signs of water and possible energy sources makes Chiava Falls one of the most promising pieces of evidence for ancient life on Mars so far. This development adds a valuable piece to the puzzle of finding life on Mars and continues to drive forward our understanding of the planet. Every bit of data, whether it confirms life or not, is crucial for advancing our exploration and discovery in the solar system. And that's a wrap for today's Spaceverse update. From the rapid turnaround of SpaceX Falcon 9 to the intriguing discoveries on Mars and the exciting advancements with rockets from Blue Origin and Rocket Lab, we've covered a lot. If you enjoyed this cosmic journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more space exploration updates.